Hi, I'm Joey Treat. My family and I live in Micronesia and work with the churches in Guam, Palau, and Chuuk. Evangelism can be one of those challenging subjects to talk about because some people love to talk about it and others don't love to talk about it because it makes them feel guilty. They wish that they were doing more or wish that they knew better how to do it. And so it can be challenging. It's something that we love, though. It's something that's from God that He wants us to do. In 2 Corinthians 5:17-19, we're told that we are reconciling the world back to God. We're reconcilers. That's a beautiful thing. In the next two verses, verses 20 and 21, we are ambassadors for Christ. That's wonderful. But still, maybe we feel like we don't know how to do evangelism. Maybe we haven't seen a system that works. It feels like everyone says no, maybe, before we even get the words out of our mouths. It feels like people are not spiritually minded anymore. That's not true, but it feels that way when we get rejected very often. Or maybe if they are spiritually minded, they're already deeply rooted in a denomination. And so we find ourselves not knowing how to talk to people, how to evangelize, what to say, when to say it, kind of throw our hands up in the air, not knowing what to do. Sometimes we may feel like if we say something, we may turn them away more than they were before. We don't want to push people further away. Or maybe we think that we can just live our Christian life, just let our light shine, and then if they're really interested, well, then they'll approach us and they'll come and ask us about spiritual things. Well, that really doesn't work for them to be the conversation starter. We know that, but it's a tempting thought to be able to say, well, I'll just live my Christian life and let them come to me. And it just doesn't work, does it? We've got to be more outgoing, more reaching out than that. But how? How do we do it? Maybe we haven't seen much of anything that really works, and so we don't know what example to follow. I appreciate what House to House, Heart to Heart School of Evangelism is doing, but aside from that, where can we look to for a good example on outreach and evangelism? You know, if we fail doing it too many times, we very quickly arrive at the conclusion and thought in the back of our minds that says, we can't do this. And then we don't believe that we can be successful in outreach. And if we don't believe that we can, well, then certainly we can. We've really lost the battle then. And then maybe discouragement sets in. And then we look for any example that we can find of how to do evangelism. We want to do it so desperately. And maybe we look at the denominations and see what they're doing. And it looks like what they're doing is working. But are we trying to follow the example of the denominations? Maybe sometimes we feel like we're competing with the denominations. So that's our question for today. Are we competing with the denominations? Out here in the islands, we have several denominations, and they are always out trying to gather people for their religious group. And we see them out working, and sometimes we think about the different teachings that they have and the different approaches to evangelism that they have. And same in the United States. We have so many different groups and so many different beliefs, we can feel outdone by them. Some of them go door to door more than we do. They require it of their people. You know, I think we have to be careful about going door to door. So many places have no solicitation signs up. Most people find it annoying when a stranger comes to their door. It's something to give thought to, something we need to be careful about. But when we see other religious groups doing it, we may feel outdone by them. Or we may feel outdone because we think that they know their arguments better than we do. Sometimes these religious groups will have classes for their people and make them learn the teaching and learn the doctrine so that when they go in and study with others, they really know their stuff. And we may hear of that and see that and feel very intimidated that they know their Bible better than we do. Truth be told, they probably only know about 40 Bible verses and then their arguments to them. I bet we know that many, even without having had classes, for the purpose. Sometimes we overthink what others are able to do and how much knowledge they have. I think we know more than we think we do. Sometimes we may feel outdone by denominations because they have more money than we do. You know, they have all of their different groups send in their contribution to a headquarters, and then that money just pools in the headquarters, and that can be intimidating to us. They can do bigger projects than we can do. In the Church of Christ, we don't have the headquarters. We don't send in money to any one collecting group, and so we don't have that kind of resources at least pooled in one area. But we see that in a denomination and we think, oh, they can do so much because of that. They have more money. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. There's one religious group that puts translators in every country. And then at the headquarters, they write their Bible study material and send it out to the translators. They translate it into the local languages. And then all worldwide, all of their people study the same material every Sunday. We see that kind of a system and we may think, wow, look at what they can do because of their resources, because of their money. Well, that may not be as advantageous as we think. And then there's another religious group that requires a 2-year stint of mission work between the high school and college age years. And we may look at that and think, look at how many missionaries they have. Look at what they're able to do, how many countries they're in. But their missionaries are very young. They have virtually no life experience, and the people in the areas where they are, they learn. This is that religious group, and these are their young men who are required to go out and do their mission work 2-year period of time. So maybe it's not as advantageous as we feel like. Sometimes we may feel outdone by denominations because we think that they love more than we do. Some of them are very lovey kind of people. They ooze and drip love, and maybe you're not wired that way. I'm not wired that way. And so we may think, well, look at what they're able to do because they're so loving, and we're not so much. Maybe we feel outdone on the subject of love. But maybe that's not really the case. Because love is not something that we show so much on the outside with our face, but something that we do with our hands. Maybe we shouldn't feel outdone by the denominations on that subject. They have bigger buildings. They have a whole band down front. They have more leadership. They have more programs. They have more teen activities. When we look at denominations, it just seems like they have more. It seems like they have more of everything compared to us. So what can we offer people outside the church? What can we offer to them to get them to come when they see all the denominations and everything that they have? Well, as we answer that, let's go back to the Bible and see what God shows us in His pattern. As we consider going back to the Bible, let's think about the organization, the hierarchy that exists in almost all denominations. That's the definition of a denomination, a religious group that has a headquarters. We may think that that's an advantage to them and that they're better able to do things because of it. They have a leadership that tells them, we're doing this at this time, and it's a worldwide structure that they have together. And we may think, oh, that's better. Maybe that's better. There'll be a board, and they'll have leaders over countries, and then leaders within that countries over states and over regions, and then it goes down to the local preacher, and just a great hierarchy of a system there. But of course in the Bible it's very different. God said that Jesus is the head of the church, Colossians 1:18, and there is no reference in the Bible to a head of the church on earth. It's just Jesus. And then you drop down to the local congregation, from the head Jesus all the way down to the local congregation, and there's elders in every congregation. In Acts 14:23, Paul and Barnabas appointed elders in every church. And so it's very different, of course, in the Bible. And those elders have to be older men who are married and have children. And it would not be okay to alter God's plan on that subject, to say that the elders could be young men who go and do specific tasks. No, God has said the elders are to be those older men. And so we can't change that, but denominations change that and things like that very readily and very easily. And that's one of the challenges in having the organization. The organization says we're changing the definition of elder, then all the churches down the road have to follow suit. Well, that's not good. So there's one head, Jesus, and then there's leaders in the local churches, and that's the Bible's way. It would not be okay to change God's pattern on that. But we may think, well, they can do more because of their hierarchy. They can do more because of their organization. But you know with me that God's way is always better. God's way is always the best way to do it. You think about the local church in these denominations doesn't have command of all of their funds. They have to send a portion of everything that they take in on Sundays to the headquarters. In fact, a local preacher friend of mine who he preaches in a denomination, he said that the headquarters told him they didn't have enough money coming in to pay the rent. And so he was told, first, with the contribution, send the money to the headquarters, and then take out your pay, and then work to pay the rent. So that's how they do things. They put the money going to the headquarters first. The local church in the hierarchy system also doesn't have authority to make decisions on its own. They have to get permission from the headquarters. Maybe their religious group is heavy on that printed material, and maybe they're in a mission field where all of the people can't read, and so they send a note to the headquarters. Can we focus more on the spoken word rather than the printed word because our people can't read? And the headquarters, maybe they'll agree, or maybe they'll send back a message and say, well, no, this is the way we do things. We are heavy on print, so you just keep putting it in print and keep working to teach the people to read or something. So the local church doesn't have authority to make its own decisions in that hierarchy system. And so it's not good. It's not good. We should not look at that and think that they're better able to do things because of that system. It's not the case. God gave us the best organizational structure, and we should delight that we've got it. The truth is, we're very different than the denominations. People in a denomination really feel like that one church is as good as another, and so if they don't like this one, they can just go down the road to the next one. Many of the denominations are like that, and many of the people who attend them are thinking that way. But our answer to that, of course, is, well, it's got to be what the Bible teaches. We've got to do it God's way in order to be pleasing to God. Like on the elders, do they have to be older men, or can they be very young men? Or on the organization of the church, does it really have to be the way God set it up, or is it okay for the headquarters to rewrite that plan? Well, we know if it's going to be pleasing to God, we've got to do it God's way. And that's not the kind of thinking that occurs in the people who are attending the denominations. They may think one's just as good as another, and so if this preacher offends me or makes me mad, then I'll just go down the road to the next one. And the preacher knows that, and so then it becomes the preacher's job in the denomination to keep the people happy. He becomes a fireman to just keep as many people happy as long as he can to help his religious group to grow. Well, that's not the way that it's supposed to be. You see, he can't teach any negative kind of messages. How often did Jesus teach negative and challenging messages? Well, our preachers need to be able to do that in order to do their job. Acts 20, verse 27, we've got to preach the whole counsel of God. If the preacher preaches too many challenging messages, well, they'll just leave. They'll say, well, I don't have to come. If he makes me upset, I'll go down to the road to the next one. One's just as good as another anyway. And so that's cannot work that way. Cannot work that way. In Hebrews 5, verse 12, he writes, for though by this time you ought to be teachers, and then later on down in the verse, they've come to need milk and not solid food. They should have grown more by that time. And if the preacher preaches that message, then if it were people in denominations today, they'd be offended and just leave. Well, that's no good. And so the Church of Christ is different from the denominations. We believe in teaching the whole counsel of God. We believe in the importance of challenging ourselves, challenging our members, so that we can all grow. You know, we all have predispositions. We all have weaknesses. We all have areas that we need help in. Well, I hope that preacher will help me in those areas. That's his job. That's his God-given job. And so this is an important difference between us and the denominations. During the coronavirus, preachers in many denominations are struggling because their people are finding it easier to just worship from home. And then their contributions are not coming in, and the denomination doesn't have enough money to pay its bills. And so that really brings up the question, is going to worship a matter of convenience, or is it something that people have to do? Hebrews 10:25, and then we'll read verse 24. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. Then verse 24, and let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. We go to worship in the Church of Christ. We go to worship to encourage one another, to build one another up because we love God. But we also go because it's commanded. We feel like and we understand that we have to go in order to be pleasing to God. Now we want to go. We want to go for the stirring up love and good works, but we also are commanded to go. But it's not that way in a denomination. In a denomination, maybe they think it's just a matter of convenience, and so they'll just go ahead and worship from home and save their contribution during that time. And then when all of the coronavirus is over or whatever is going on at the time, if that church is still around, then fine. If not, then they'll just go find another one. So a completely different perspective. You know, the problem in denominations is that once they break away from the Bible's teaching in one area, well, then it's easy to break away in any area. So better we just stick to the Bible. Another difference between the churches of Christ and denominations is that Christianity is a whole life-changing experience. The message from a denomination going out to people that it's trying to influence is this: come be a part of our church. We have classes, we have programs, we have a great building, we have a cool preacher. And they'll say, well, this is what sets us apart from all of the other denominations. And that's their draw. That's how they try to get people. But in the Bible, it's different. God's offer is different. God says more like this: if you come to the church, I will be your God and I will walk with you. I will bless you and help you along the way. But you'll have to not alter my word at all. Do things just the way I've asked, please. And so it's different. And for example, Matthew 15:9, we don't want to follow the traditions of men, not any changes in the Bible whatsoever. In John 15:14, you are my friends if you do whatever I command you. 2 John verses 9 through 11, whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house, nor greet him, for he who greets him shares in his evil deeds. Whoa, that's serious. The teaching is important. It's important to God. The draw is not, our church has these special features. The draw is, difficult or not difficult, this church is striving to follow the Bible. And doing so will put you right with God and you'll have His help in life. In Matthew 7:14 we read, because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. That would be very unappealing to the average person in a denomination. When you talk with people who were not raised in the Lord's church but are now members of the Lord's church, you often get a very similar statement from them. They usually say something like, I was in the Bible study and then I just realized this is the truth of the Bible. This is God's church, and I was in. And it didn't matter to them what they had to give up or what they had to change, because they realized this was really the church of the Bible. Christianity is a life-changing experience. And that's why Jesus had the count the cost passages of Luke 14:25 to 33 about the king and did he have enough strength to go to the battle, or should he give up, and the man the money to finish the tower. Count the cost before the event. Make sure you're able to finish, or with the king to win. Now, the Christian life has challenges, and that's the message. It's not necessarily easy. It's going to be some hard parts, and will you be able to finish? Jesus says, count the cost. Well, that tells us, Jesus is warning us, it's not necessarily going to be easy. And so it's not about choosing a church that has the programs that suit the family the best way. It's about choosing a church that's truly following the Bible only, and be a part of that church and to help it grow. It's not easy, but it's real. And that's one of the differences between the denominations and the Lord's church. Where we're going is different. And so the denominations don't have an advantage over us. We're not competing with them in any way. Let's strive to follow the Bible closely ourselves and to lead as many others as we can to do the same. In this lesson, we've talked about, are we competing with the denominations? And we've not talked about how to do evangelism, though that's really where we're coming from and what this points to. There is a lot that we could say about how to do evangelism. You know, as times change, our approach needs to change. The Bible message never changes, but our approach changes. And I believe that a good approach today to reach out to people who are outside of the church is first to earn their trust, and then to talk spiritually with them, build that spiritual interest, and then get them into a sit-down Bible study. Our job is to get them into the study. It's the Bible that does the teaching once we're in the study, but our job is to get them into that study. And so that's where we can narrow our focus and be more successful with evangelism. We are not in competition with the denominations.